game I played earlier today against Islot, I don't know how to say his name, and it doesn't really matter, but I thought it would be a fun game to review, take a look at some of the good plays that were made and some of the mistakes that I made. There were a couple of blunders made by both myself and my opponent, and so without further ado, let's jump into the book opening, which was the Queen's Pawn with the NF6 Indian game. I didn't know that this was the Indian game. I just like defending the d5 square if the pawn does push out with the knight. It just makes it, not as much center control happening. If the queen comes out, there's ways to defend against it. He decides to bring his bishop out, increasing influence on the center of the game, and then I move up d6. These are all book moves at the beginning of the game, so pretty good. Here, instead of moving my light bishop, I could have moved my pawn up. I assume this is to allow a side fianchetto, or maybe fianchetto over here. I'm not 100% sure why, but we are taking control of more center squares with the light bishop. Either way, he decides to move his knight over. I decide to move my knight over. He decides to kind of pin my knight to the king. And this is where things for me start to get a little bit sketchy. And the favor does start to tilt into his for the rest of the game, or not the rest of the game, but for almost half of the game, it's kind of in his favor, and I'm fighting an uphill battle. So I move my queen up, my thought process here being, if he does decide to take with the bishop, I'm going to be able to take back, have some influence over the c file, and also some pressure on his knight. I could even jump into here, having the bishop kind of backing up my queen, taking control of the center of the board by a large margin. But I decide to move the queen up. He pushes his pawn forward, which is the best move. I decide to take with my knight, which is also the best move. He takes with his queen, and I decide to push up with my pawn. This is putting some pressure over here. If he decides to take, I get to take. If he takes, I take. So I'm winning the trades on the knight side of things. If he takes with his queen, I can take with my queen or the pawn. So here is feeling pretty good. It is kicking the queen. Moving up here, I can understand why, because the queen is not able to take the pawn. If the bishop takes, I take. I didn't like that idea as much as the pawn kicking the queen, which it does that exactly. Queen decides to move back. My plan came to fruition perfectly. We love when a plan comes together, and I can now move my bishop up to attack this knight or to kind of do some pressure over here. Didn't care about this side of the board at all though, because I wanted to get rid of this knight. I didn't like him. I didn't like the influence that he had on the e5 square or anything over here. And especially after this castle happened, I was really happy to see that, because now when I do take this, I'm ruining the king's defensive pawn structure, okay? I always love, after the king castles, if I can do a relatively even trade, but it wrecks the structure of the pawns on the side that has been castled, I like doing that. It makes it way harder for my opponent to defend, and this was pretty much free because, there's nothing else attacking this. It just has to be the pawn wrecking that defensive structure. Then I decide to move my queen over. I didn't like that I couldn't move my knight, and I didn't like that if I did move my knight, like my knight is double pinned because I've got the queen here and the king here. Pawn could have moved up. If bishop takes, I can take with the knight, but I didn't like having this knight pinned by this bishop. I was looking for a way to move it. So the idea here was, I'm going to move the queen over, then I can put some pressure on this, and the next move that I do after this is actually castle. So I kind of did this out of order of how the engine wanted me to do it, but he pushes back. This is the best move according to the engine. My next move is actually castling, so this knight is no longer pinned. He moves his rook onto the d file, and now I'm marching the pawns forward to kind of disrupt what this bishop has going on. One of the things I did notice during the game though was that if I push this pawn up immediately, his dark square bishop could move over, putting some pressure on my queen, or if I move my queen, then putting pressure on my rook, basically hanging my rook for the dark squared bishop. So I don't end up doing that. We're going to see how that plays out in a couple of moves here. But he decides to put some pressure on my queen. I was having a look at this. I'm thinking, okay, where does he go from here? He could go here, putting me into check. I'm able to take with the pawn. If I move my queen here, he could move here, putting me into check again. My dark bishop takes. Here, I can do a pawn take, or if the queen is there, the queen can take. So I wasn't super worried about this knight getting up in my business. I move up here, again, putting a little bit of pressure, though I'm not going to take because that's a horrible trade, but I'm defending from this move, from this move. This move is defended by both of these pawns. So I'm moving my queen in a way that, for me, seems defensively advantageous. He pushes up here. This permits me to kick his bishop, but I don't actually do that. I set the dark bishop up. So my goal here was that in the next move, if this pawn didn't take, which he does take, spoiler alert, that's going to happen. But my thought process here was moving the dark bishop here basically guarantees that I'm going to win his dark bishop if this pawn didn't take. Because once I move up here, the only spot that the bishop can go is here or here. If he goes here and takes the pawn, I take back. If he goes here, my dark bishop now takes this. So that was my thought process. What ended up actually happening was his pawn takes. I take back with the queen, which was actually an inaccuracy. Funny enough, taking a free pawn here wasn't good. I don't really know why. It says I'm losing a pawn this way because he takes, and then I just don't respond to that in any way. The engine does some weird stuff. Even though this is an inaccuracy, I feel like when I'm down on material, taking the free pawn that is hanging, that seems pretty good to me. I didn't really see a world where he takes, I take, I don't know. That follow-up didn't make any sense to me. He decides to take here. Now with my knight not hanging or not being pinned to anything, I'm able to take back. He pushes this pawn up, which is totally fine. I decide to take instead of pushing forwards. This allows the opponent to win a tempo by threatening my queen. Now, there's gonna be some funny business. I'm gonna tell you right now, some weird stuff is gonna happen in this mid game, and there's gonna be a bunch of back-to-back blunders, basically. So this move right here is a blunder according to the engine. And the reason it's a blunder is because there's a free bishop, right? My queen should move over here, taking the light squared bishop because it's completely hanging undefended. This is the next best move. However, I made a mistake and actually gave white a bit of a break here because I didn't capitalize on this blunder. I decided to put the king into check. Now, the king being put into check here is a forced move over. There is no way for him to defend unless he brings his bishop back. He should have brought his bishop back. He didn't. He does actually move the king over. The next move I make is I'm trying to set something up with my rooks. Basically, if I could take this bishop for free, the only thing queen can do is take, and then I get the queen for free, right? If I'm able to get my rook involved in any way, that's going to be very good for me. However, he decides to put pressure on me with his rook. And now this isn't great. This is not a good position for him to be in. It is a blunder, and it permits the opponent, that being me, to eventually win a bishop. So I move over here. That is the best move. This wins a bishop according to the engine. If we show that tactic, he's supposed to push up, and then I take the bishop, and then he takes, and then I take the queen back. So it's almost an even game after all the trades are said and done here. That is not what happens this game at all. After I make this move, he pushes up with his rook. This is forced to block the check that I put the king into here. That's totally fine. I then move my rook up to take. My thought process here is if I take with the rook, the queen might take, then I'm going to get the queen free, right? It's a hanging queen if he decides to take the rook, and it's putting a lot of pressure really close to the king. This is something that is going to be scary to most players. This would be very scary to me, but what he ends up doing is actually pressuring my queen with his light squared bishop. I can't take here because then the king gets to take. I can't push forward because the rook gets to take. I can't move back this way. That's going to be, bad. The next best move is probably e4. I could go here, offering the queen trade with my knight protecting. What I end up doing is moving back just the one square. Move my queen to a safe square. There's nothing happening. There's no pressure. I can breathe a sigh of relief after this move. He moves his rook over, and this is where things get very, very not good for me. I decide to blunder my way into essentially giving my rook away for free to his rook if it wasn't pinned. That's a big thing. I saw this pin and I was like, okay, well, if I take this, he can't take. It's pinned right now. The reason that this is a blunder is because of this follow-up, which actually did happen. It didn't play out like this, like the engine wanted, but he does make a great move in moving his bishop, his light square bishop over, which is now putting me into check because my king is on this light diagonal. And the only way that I can really defend against this is if the queen takes the bishop, right? My queen could move down here. It's a hanging queen. We're in the exact same position that we were before. I could go here. Again, same position that we were in before. If I move my rook down, he can just take the queen, and then this rook is now pinned. We're not in a good spot. So I actually spent a lot of time on this move, kind of looking at the different things that could happen, where I would go. And I saw that, okay, if I take, he takes, I take. All right, that seems pretty big brain because he's not thinking about this queen here. And this rook being pinned is also, not a great thing for him. He can't move it out of the way. And once I take, it's the only way that he can take my queen. So that's exactly what I do. I make this move. He decides to take, which was actually a miss because he should have let my queen live, take my rook with his queen. I can't take here because his queen is defending and his king is defending, so I need to retreat. And I couldn't retreat on any of these files. I would either have to move here or into this little nook that's beside my king. But he didn't do that. He fell victim to the greediness that all of us low elo players fall into, taking my queen at the first opportunity that he saw. I took his queen back, and now I'm in a winning position. There are no queens. I still have my knight. I'm up on pawns. We have a very nice winning position after that little trade-off here. And he decides to take this pawn to kind of try to get a little bit closer to that material being even. He should have taken my knight. And that makes a lot of sense because if you see here, he would still have his rook kind of in the middle of the board. If he takes my knight, there's really no way for me to defend against that. I'm not going to move my rook over to the e file to do anything. I can't move my king over here. If he had made this move, I probably move my pawn on the b file up so that I've got a little bit of an escape route for my king if anything happens on this back rank. I decide then, instead of this knight move, which I didn't even see, didn't even cross my mind while I was playing the game, but it makes a lot of sense because it kind of blocks this rook in. Rook could have taken the pawn on the h file, but we could have moved here. If he takes, I'm able to take. There's a lot of good things to do with the knight here. I was thinking that if the blah, 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 blah. Speaking lots of words, I need a sip of water. Okay, my thought process here was the rook on d file doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm not really preventing anything from happening, but if I move over, we're now in a position where if he takes, I take, he takes, I put him into check, and he has two options once I put him into check. Either the rook comes back up, I take it for free, or the more likely scenario, he moves over here, I get to move up, and now I can work on these pawns and really have a material and pawn advantage in the end game. So that's exactly what happens. I was able to predict the future of my opponent. I take back, he takes, I put him into check, he moves up, I move over instead of immediately moving back up and putting him into check. The reason for this being that now he cannot put me into this back rank here. If he did move down onto the E rank, the 8th rank on E, if he moved back there, I do still have an escape route, but I didn't like that. I was like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm actually gonna put some pressure on him, just see what his response is, and he decides to take the free pawn, creating a passed pawn on the H file. Again, totally fine. We're happy with that. Kind of predicting some of these things happening as I was evaluating where things were on the board. And now I'm able to put the king into check, take a free pawn. He moves down, putting me into check. I just move up. He puts me into check again. I move over. He's moving his king over to try to stop me from taking all of these pawns, but nothing can stop a rook on a rampage, and I eat everything up. It's absolutely delicious. And the only other pawn is now being protected by his rook on the H file. So he moves up, putting me into check. I move up, protected by my pawn. He's putting some pressure on my rook, and I decide, I'm gonna offer the rook trade, right? In this position, I'm feeling very confident. If he takes here, I take back. I've got 2 passed pawns that are on the side of the king, but we're not super worried about it because after this move, he can either move his king or he can start marching up. If he moves, I move, he moves, I move, he moves, I move, he moves, I move, he promotes, I take it back. We're in an okay position right now. I'm able to win the pawn as it stands if we do this rook trade, and then I've got 4 pawns against a king. I should be able to promote and win this game. He moves up, I move my pawn up, he moves over, I protect my king. I'm like, we got to keep, these 2 guys are buddies. These guys are butt buddies right now, standing hand in hand. This was a little bit of a trap set up by him because what could have happened is I could have been like, oh, I'll just throw my pawn up here. He takes, and now I can't take back. I lose the pawn that I've pushed up past the middle of the board. I decide to put him back into check. I know for a fact that he can't move to any of these 3 squares, so he is going to have to move back, which he does. I'm able to move my pawn up, protected by my king. He moves his king over. I push up knowing that I'm protected here. Now the engine says I probably should have moved my king up, and this would have actually led to a slightly quicker checkmate if that was the case. But I didn't do that. I was like, I really want to promote this pawn to a queen. He moves over. I'm pushing my other pawns up now, just trying to preemptively get prepared and ready for the fact that he is going to be pushing this pawn up here soon. I move up, he moves his pawn, move up once more, moves his pawn down, and this move basically seals the deal. Once I get this pawn on the top rank here, his king can't move to defend. He can move up here, but he's blocked in aside from these 2 moves. If he moves this way, it's a really bad time. And so he does move up here, and this is a completely losing position. I'm able to promote, and I can do one of 2 things. If I promote this pawn, he's able to take. I can promote this pawn then, but then he gets my rook. So I have to promote the pawn on the D file, forcing him to take. It's a forced move. And the last move here, promoting to a queen, getting the classic ladder checkmate, whatever this one is called. I don't remember. I think it's a ladder checkmate when you walk the king to the edge of the board with a queen and a rook. I was able to do that through promotion. So that was pretty cool. Very happy with how this game went. Very happy with some of the strategy I saw. Some of the blunders were oopsie poopsie, but you know what? It's chess. We all blunder. Everybody blunders. So I can't be too upset about it. That's another win in my back pocket, and we are slowly creeping towards that 700 elo. I'm excited. We're gonna do it. Maybe even by the end of May, I could be a 700 elo player. Who knows what the future holds for me? What I do know is I'm thankful that you watched this video and hung out with me for a little while watching a chess match. If you enjoyed your time here and you're new, definitely subscribe to the channel because I upload a new chess video every single day. If you like this video in particular, drop a like on it. Helps me out a lot and I would really appreciate it. And with that out of the way, I appreciate you. I love you. You smell great. You look great today. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.